Welcome to a new video from codingfreaks here. Today we're going to continue on a series that we hadn't much content in the recent past, which is Azure DevOps. And it was quite a successful series. You guys liked it, obviously. And I decided to continue on that. The last videos I had on that, I will put the links in the description, were about service connections. And service connections is always a big mystery to a lot of people. So I decided to make, for two reasons, to make this tutorial. First of all, I'm going to talk about some basic stuff of service connections, so hopefully to clear stuff out for you guys. And I also want to show you how to use the new federated service connections or the federation identities in order to not to have to maintain passwords of service principals and so on. And there are obviously ways you could do it and ways codingfreaks would do it, as you know. So let's jump right into it. So I prepped a little presentation to get the theory a little bit out of the way. Let's see how this goes. Okay, so what I want to talk about first is what actually are service connections. Okay, so it's always hard to describe. I try to do the one sentence here, and hopefully this gives you some idea. So what I call it is service connections enable pipelines in Azure DevOps to access resources outside of Azure DevOps. So that's what I think what service connections are. Here you have it. Here's my definition. Okay, so what does it mean? So first of all, you have resources, let's say, in Azure. That's the first thing we want to talk about today. And then how would you access them as a user? So this is you. This is the user which tries to, let's say, deploy something to a subscription, push an image manually. Okay, so what would you do? First of all, you would have to authenticate. This is the red here, and then authorize. This is the green one in Azure, in Entra ID. So what it means is you authenticate yourself, MFA, and whatnot. Everything is happening, and the red layer is just ensuring that you are the one who you claim to be. This is authentication. And then the green layer here, the second one, is usually when we talk about resources, is the role-based access control of the Azure Resource Manager. So what this is, it gives you roles like reader, contributor, owner, and whatnot on certain scopes. Let's say on the complete subscription there on the right side, or just on a storage account here down below, or whatever. So this is what you do. If you have this, now you can go on and interact with resources depending on the roles that you have your own, right? So, okay, the same is true for everything which wants to interact with Azure resources, meaning if we now talk about our pipeline. So one thing you can use service connections for is to simply interact with something outside of Azure. Okay, so that could be on the bottom left there, that could be a Docker hub where you want to push an image to. So in that case, you don't have to deal with the right side with all the Azure tenant stuff and so on, because this resource is not inside of Azure. That's not what we are talking about today. This is something external. So I'm concentrating on the Azure side. Okay, let's go. So what do you need to do? Actually, what you need to do is you need to create something in Entra ID. This is a symbol for it, which is sometimes referred to as an app registration, aka service principal, aka enterprise application, depending on how it's set up and how it's used. So anyways, what you do is you go to Entra, and I will show this later. You go to Entra, create an app registration, and then what you would do on the classic way, you would give it a password. We will look it up in a second. And then you need to tell Azure DevOps, the pipelines later, what this user is. So you need to give him the ID of that user. And if it's a password user, you need to give him or provide him the password. So what then happens is the Azure pipeline, as soon as it needs to gain access to an Azure resource in a pipeline, let's say, in order to deploy something, what this will do, it will use this thing here, this thing, in order to authenticate itself against Entra ID. So now it has a user. And then it would, depending on what roles did you provide for that app registration, it would then deploy stuff. for you. So meaning it looks then like this. It uses, on the right side, it uses the same flow as you have it with your user kind of. And the service connection is simply a database entry in Azure DevOps, which stores the username and password in the old way in order to use this against Entra ID, in the case you are talking to Entra ID. That's basically it. So, okay, with that out of the way, and we will see samples. So what options do we have? What is so complicated about this? So let's see the history of it. So the first thing I am aware of, which happens in Azure DevOps in regard to talking to Azure. So I'm not talking about any other resource. We are talking about something which is in Azure, okay? The first thing that you could do is you have this classic automatic service connection. So what it means is you would go to the Azure portal, to the Azure DevOps portal, dev.azure.com/whatever your organization is, select a project and go to service connections. And then you manually say, I want a new service connection of the type Azure Resource Manager. I want to interact with Azure resources. So there comes the blade in that. And then in that blade, you have those selections here. And I just showed you some states of this. And then you would use app registration automatic. It's recommended, still recommended, and it's still bad, by the way. This is bad. I will explain in a second why. And then you would say, hey, I gave this thing a password in the old days, so I want you to give you the client ID and the password for you to be able to log on to Azure. Okay, and then what this would do, because it's an automatic, it means that this thing will try to talk to Entra ID. It will create an app registration for you, which it names ugly. The name would be your DevOps organization name, followed by a dash, followed by the name of your project, another dash, and then a GUID. It will create this thing for you. It will give it a password in this automatic thing, so you did not have to provide anything. That's why people like it. But this password will expire at some point. I think in 1 year, I'm not sure. It has an expiration. Problem with that is, if this service connection expires, then because the app registration expired, you have to delete it and create a new one. And in order for your pipeline still to work, you need to name it exactly as the old one. So everything is managed on the Azure tenant side. Everything is managed by Azure DevOps. So as I said, this is bad. Why is it bad? So first of all, an automatic service principal is probably something you are not allowed to deploy as a developer in your Azure tenant if you're working in a corporate environment. There are administrators which will create service principals for you, probably, hopefully in an automatic way, and then will tell you, this is your service principal, use it. So you're not allowed to create those things. Second of all, because of the first one, you don't have control over it. So that's also bad. Third of all, let's imagine you are admin and developer in one person, which could happen on your Azure tenant. That means you are able to automatically create those. What happens then is you have this ugly list of service registrations in your Entra ID, which is very cluttered and very hard to read. And last of all, you don't have any control about how the service principal is created. And after 1 year, let's say, you have to redo it all over. And so you're stuck there. Every project needs, depending on whenever you create an app registration, it will run out. You have to recreate it or your pipelines will fail. So not good. Okay, so next thing is classic manual. I had videos about that. So what we now do, it's pretty much the same. The only difference is that I created manual here, which means, hey, Azure DevOps, do not create the service principal for me. I will create it in advance. So I have an existing service principal. I know the ID and the password. It's still a secret based. So I will provide you those values. The good thing about that is I later, when the password expires on the Entra side, I can go there and refresh the password and then give the service connection a new password, and it will work again, so I don't have to delete it. But I still have to do something when it expires. Also bad for the same reasons. Next one. Now the new stuff, the federated service connections, but the automatic one. So this, as you can see, is the way Azure wants you to create those things. Like, both are recommended options. So select app registration automatic. In other words, Azure will take care, Azure DevOps will take care of creating it, naming it, and so on. And then workload identity federation. Okay, so what this again will lead to, it's again an automatically named service principal in your tenant. You have no control over how it's created. But the good thing, because of the workload identity federation, is you don't have any password involved. So what it means is you never have to touch this service connection again, because it's a passwordless trust, if you will, between Azure DevOps and Azure based on this thing. Okay, we will see that in action, this thing, later on. Then the next good thing is manual federated. So same thing, we go to manual, and then we have an existing service principal, and then we say, hey, we want to federate it. And there's even another option to update an existing classic service connection and make it a federated one. All of this is not what I'm going to have here with this tutorial, because I hate all of this. It's all depending on clicks. It's all depending on going to the portals and clicking around and stuff like that. I don't like that at all. It's not automated in a way. So what I'm heading for is the all-in-one solution. So what I want to have, I want the service connection and the existing service principal, which already is there. I want them to be using an automation. In my case, it will be PowerShell and Microsoft Graph, the API for Azure DevOps and Entra. I want to use those technologies to simply, in one script, just generate both of them, connect them together, that's it. Okay, so that's the goal of this talk. So with that out of the way, let's start and go over to the demo. Okay, it's a little bit later now. So if you hear some cracks on the recording, it's probably because fireworks are going on. It's, as I said, 31st, or did I say it? I even don't know. It's 31st of December 2025, which means in Germany you are allowed to have firecrackers going off, so probably a bunch of wipe coders, because those are people who have time for this insanity. Anyways, we are going to check out, first of all, what I showed in the presentation, and go ahead and create some new app registrations. So what you basically do is you go to your Azure portal and you go to the Entra ID and you visit app registrations. Just try to make it in a way so that no secrets are exposed to you guys. It's not so easy in the Azure portal, by the way, but anyways, let's create it manually. Okay, so or let's see here, and then we will hop over here to Azure DevOps. I have this Azure DevOps organization called codingfreaks, and there is this demo project. And what I'm going to do is I want to create in the project settings down here, and then on service connections here, I want to create some manual service connections, just to repeat what I said in the intro, right? So if you go to create service connection, as you can see here, here's a bunch of targets, if you will. So external resources that you could add users for Azure DevOps. So that Azure DevOps is, or pipelines of Azure DevOps are able to communicate to those services. And what we are going to do today is we try to communicate to Azure Resource Manager. That's why we click on that. And now here is the combination. The screenshot I showed you earlier are here. So let's start with this thing, which was the recommended automatic app registration. We want to use secrets because that's the old way to do it. We get a warning because now, as I said, there are identity federation options. And now he's loading my subscriptions, which takes a while. I will probably cut this in the video and come back when it's loaded. So I'm selecting my test subscription, which was the wrong one. Let's go and select the correct one. This one, not the IAM. And then I could select a resource group. I just want the subscription to be enabled. And let's say this is my test SP. Okay, so I don't need to grant access to pipelines because I don't have any here. And what I'm going to do is I hit the save button. And let's see if this works now, because it depends a little bit. And that's what I'm talking about now. It worked. Okay, so here you have, let me go back into the list. Now you have this service connection. And what's going on with the blue dot? The blue dot says, okay, you should probably convert it like this thing says to you, convert that into an federated one so that you don't need any passwords. But besides of that, I just want to look what happened. So what you can see here is you have two links, which says, okay, listen, you can manage the app registration. As I told you, he is generating an app registration in the Azure portal. We will look at this in a second. Or you can manage the service connection roles. So those are the two things I showed you in my presentation, the red one and the not so red one, and the greener one, the yellow one, which is authentication. This is the app registration, and authorization. That is the other one. So let's have a look what happens when I click here. So actually he goes over to a deep link into the Azure portal here. And this is what he created. Remember, I told you, you get organization name dash project name dash some GUID. That's what you got for now. And then you now have this GUID here, which is another one. This is the client ID. And what this thing has is, it has a client secret which expires, 3 months even, only 3 months is the default. So this will expire in March or actually in April next year, in 3 months from now. So that's what you got. So, and if it expires, what you need to do is you go back to your organization and you actually delete it. Let me do that for you. You delete it. And now it takes some time because he's actually deleting this one as well. Now I get a 404 because he deleted the corresponding service principal because he generated it. So he will clean it up if he comes back. So that is what happened. So this is this service connection, the manual, the automatic one. So again, let's go back to Resource Manager. And now the other one is app registration manual, which also with secret. Now I won't do that now, but basically what you give him a subscription ID and subscription name. Remember that for later. So what it means is you need to provide him this subscription, which he should be or having roles on. So in order to be at least contributor on that subscription. And then you provided a client ID, which you pre-generated in the Azure portal. We will look up this later. A tenant, the tenant ID, the ID of your Azure tenant, and the secret. Here it is. Here's the password. Then you can verify it, give it a name, as I said, and here you go. If you created the subscription in this way, the service principal, aka app registration, now during the app registration creation, you could decide how long the password should be valid. You can create a new secret and then update the secret here because you have full control. That is why I had those videos telling you guys that at that time, it was better to generate manual service connections than to do the automatic stuff because it's just dirty. It's just click and dirty and that's it. Okay. So the current option looks like that. So you go to create service connection, Azure Resource Manager. You create let's do an automatic one, which is bad. Okay, that's the baddest of all. But now we select Identity Federation and we are going to select a subscription. So let's wait for this thing to load. So I pre-selected my test subscription and then, I don't know, test, not SP, SC, I mistyped it before. So basically the same thing. And let me generate this one. So again, he is taking some time because remember, he needs to talk to Azure in the backend, to the Graph API, in order to generate a service principal and to set everything up. So here's what you get. and that's very interesting. We need to talk about this information here more in detail, but let's look what we got. We have an issuer, which basically is your OpenID v2, I think. What is it called? Authority? I think so. It's called authority normally. This is my tenant ID here. I probably need to mask it, to be honest. And then you have here a subject identifier. What's important here? Very important. I think last year, or beginning last year, Microsoft started to migrate existing Azure DevOps organization to this subject identifier pattern, which means before of that, it was not that pattern. In fact, the pattern which old tenants had was starting with sc : -- I think, and then there came an URI, which was, by the way, predictable. So it was containing information from your environment. Now, Microsoft switched over, and now you get this not, as far as I know, predictable, non-predictable elements here, like this, probably hash, I don't know, and this GUID, whatsoever, multiple GUIDs, 2 of them actually. I don't even know what this is. Keep that in mind, it gets important later. So with that, let's go to the app registration he actually created. Again, he brings us to the portal, to that service principal. He generated a new one. Okay, fine. So here we have the CADF. What is it here? Yeah, no, it's not. The CA, it's not part of this thing. So I don't know what this URL is. Anyways, so here is the app registration, aka service principal. This dialog created. If you go to the secrets now, you can see that it only has federated credentials. Here we talk about this. No secrets contained. So it's like a trust based on that subject identifier and the issuer. So if you click on that, you can see that those are the settings. It's an other issuer. So there are some known issuers, and then there's other issuer where you have to manually provide everything. So here's your issue itself. Remember, it's the same like in Azure DevOps, and the value for the subject, which is matching. And what this means is, this works, if you ask me, this trust is based on the same idea that you have on domain ownership. So on domain ownership, if you are, let's say, you want to go from one domain provider with your website domain to another one. So this new provider needs to ensure that you are actually the owner of a specific domain. Let's say codingfreaks.de, which is my domain. So how do I prove it to him? I don't want to send him a passport or whatever license document. No. What he says, what they say is, listen, I want you to generate a so-called A or TXT record, depends on, in your DNS configuration. I'm looking now constantly for that specific record, which is a totally random value usually. And I'm constantly polling on your DNS entries. As soon as I find it, I'm going to become green. So meaning now I know that you are the legit owner of that domain. So in fact, he does not know that. All he knows is that you have the password and the user rights to change your DNS settings. That is what he knows. And hopefully, fingers crossed, this means you are the owner. If not, somebody stole your domain, which happened, by the way. Attacks happened who did stuff like that in the past. Anyways, it's the same idea here. So if this value is the same like on the other side, he just says, okay, you don't need a password anymore because you obviously, with the right that you own on both sides, you had the right to create a service principal here, which is a condition. So at least application administrator in Entra is the role you need to have, the Entra role, in order to generate new app registrations, right? And on the other side here in Azure DevOps, you need to be at least project administrator in order to create those service connections. So that means you are a legit user to generate those connections between Azure and Azure DevOps. That is what it means. Great. So what we will do, we instantly want to delete this because we want to see if he gets rid of this thing as well. Sure enough, it's gone, not found anymore. Okay, so he deleted that as well. So that's the basic idea, guys. That is what we're dealing with. So this is the kind of service principle that we want, but we don't want to click around here like idiots, clicking on resource manager in this portal and click here, click there, bringing in some mistyping, some auto-generated, I don't know, managed identities or service principles, not managed identities. We don't want any of that. We want full control. And that is what the third and last part of this video is all about. So from here, we're switching gears. I will make a little break and I will be right back to talk about how to do that in PowerShell. See you in a second. So before we start hacking around, maybe let's do some thinking about what I want to show you in which order of things. Okay, so the end result pretty clearly is that we have, can I do that? That we have two things, which actually is, as you've seen, a service principal created. And then also we want to have a service connection created, service connection, which in fact is they're kind of interconnected, right? So they're kind of both the same. So let's say they're pointing to each other, are they pointing? No, actually the service principal is kind of pointing to the service connection. So that, no, actually, I don't know. I don't know what I'm even talking about. So let's say they're both pointing at each other, whatever. So we need to create that. In order to create it, which order should we apply? Turns out that is easy. So the first thing we need to do is actually, we need to find out where this is text. So this is number 1, and there you go, this is number 2. Why is that? In order to create the service principal, we need to get information from the service connection in Azure DevOps in order to know what is my issuer and what is my subject, because this, remember, is generated automatically for you by Azure DevOps. And then this should match in the service principal. So that's why first service connection and then service principal. For both actions, we want to use the graph API. So we want graph or slash, what is that? CLIs, which is actually the same. You will see that. And we want to leverage those in order to generate those things. And we will do that using, simple enough, PowerShell, which means you don't need to do that in this way. You also could use Azure CLI, I think, which I don't often use. You could use Postman in order to generate those requests and stuff like that. But there's a lot going on. So that is why this part is a little bit longer. But I wanted to go step by step through this process, because what I don't like in most scenarios is they skip over certain parts, and I don't want to do that. So it's my channel, so I decided I can take my time. Okay, so let's do that, actually. So, okay, before we start, maybe one more thing. What you need to ensure is that you have, with your logged in user into Azure, first of all, you need to ensure that you are logged in with your session. So down there in my terminal, the one thing I want to do is connect AZ account. Here is my tenant and subscription, doesn't matter which one actually. I do that, and then just to point out, I have a list of Azure, FOPS, like FUCK and then ops, in order to let the YouTube algorithm not get in my way. Not that it actually matters on the viewer count I have. Anyways, what I want to show you is this is waiting. And you ask yourself, what is it waiting for? The interesting thing is just unminimize your window and Microsoft, because quality doesn't matter anymore that much, and user experience or whatever, decided that this window can stay in the background if another window is maximized. I don't get it, because it happens all the time on Windows, by the way. So this window is here so that you do not have to open a browser all the time. So if you add continue, he's going on, but you always have to remember, yeah, there was something going on. No windows popping up. This has no thing here, I think, in the background. Why is this coming? And this is get AZ config. So your local AZ configuration, just a side note, is, I think it was login experience v2 is on. Only active when authenticated user to choose subscription. And no, this was not the one, and I'm not sure which one was it. Was it this there? Web account manager will be default. Yeah. So this is this enable login by WAM. By the way, it is not on, it is true. Where this one should have been named enable something. This is all over the place. Can you follow me? I know it's a side note. You can skip this. I will have like a time range. But you know, I decided to start from now on to point to stuff which I hate, really hate, from Microsoft. Because I don't know why this is years now here. This is all over the place. You cannot predict how this behaves. And I don't know. Okay, so anyways, I am logged in on my terminal session on my tenant. The user I'm logged in, if I do get AZ context, what's important here, and I need to mask a lot of stuff here, this and that, I'm seeing this, we will see. The point is, I need to ensure that this user now has the appropriate permissions, which means in Azure Entra ID, I need to be either global admin or something, which is not necessary, but application administrator, because I want to create app registration in Azure. On Azure DevOps, this user, the same one, needs to be project administrator. Okay, fine. With that out of the window, we can now start doing stuff. What you next need to ensure, let me open my terminal, maybe it's better readable. Get installed PS resource. So you need, thanks. You need some PS resources to be installed. So first of all, you need obviously the AZ, the PowerShell AZ module to be installed. And you need, where is it? Active Directory, is it here? The AD, I'm not even sure if this is part of that one or not. You need the AD to be installed. Microsoft Graph is not necessary, I think. But something was, let me see, grep AD? No, grep, yeah, that's it. Okay, I think AZ is the only, so install PS resource, there it is. So this is the command you need to ensure that you executed it, and then you can basically go ahead. Okay, so let's generate a file and let's do it run PS1. Let's say I will share the source code with you guys. If you're impatient, you can go somewhere else and check it out. So let's start by digging into it. Okay, there are, to get ahead of myself a little bit, in order to generate the Azure DevOps service connection. Remember, that was the first thing. So that guy here, this is our first goal. How do we generate it? So turns out, in order to generate this guy, you need to perform web requests against Azure DevOps. That is in itself an own issue. Thanks for informing me. An own issue. Because there is, as far as I know, no CLI for that. So you cannot install like commands for that. But you actually need to do invoke web requests. Okay, cool. So what this is, and I will just paste it in as a block here. So I have this method. Let me clean it up a little bit. So it's called invoke Azure DevOps REST API. Okay, that's what I did. So this thing is like a generic way I always use in my tooling in order to talk to the Azure DevOps REST API. This is like a wrapper. It does some preliminary stuff, building up URIs, whatnot. And then the main thing here is basically this line. So this line calls a method which is not there. I will bring it in a second, called getConstants. You can name it differently, but let me bring that in order to explain what this does. I prepped it here on the side so that I'm not mistyping stuff. So this is this getConstant method. So what it does, it returns a PowerShell object. And actually, I could have removed the token URL and the version here. I'm using 7.1. I'm not even sure if this is the latest version, but I tested it with this version. Everything works. So the main difference is there are two main URLs when you talk to the Graph API of Azure DevOps. Another thing where I cannot wrap my head around. Okay, I don't know why they make it so peculiar difficult to talk to the REST API, but it's important. So you have two Graph API endpoints, dev.azure.com and app vs SPS visualstudio.com, which kind of give you different endpoints. Some of the methods are not working vice versa. So that's why I have those both things returned. It's just a static object. And then as you can see here, calling my invoke Azure DevOps REST API, I can pass in the API type, which by default points to Azure DevOps, which is the dev.azure.com URL. But you can select, or you can say, hey, I actually want to go to Visual Studio and use a different one if you ever need to. You will see it today. Based on that, we are deciding which of the things we are pointing to and getting our base URL, the API version. That's the way I do it to have it clean. And then actually it's all about calling the API. I give here the option to add URL parameters in an optional array. And then the next thing we need to do before we actually make a request, because as you can see in the request, you need to pass in an access token, a bearer token. In order to do this, the last function comes into play, which is get access token. So let me show you that. And as I said, if you're not interested in this stuff, just skip ahead in the timeline. But I want to explain everything. So this is get access token. And what this does is it says, okay, give me a tenant ID, give me a resource URL, and then tell me if you want to retrieve the access token as a plain text or as a secure string. This is PowerShell magic. Okay. But anyways, what this does, it calls the get AZ access token thingy, either for a resource URL, which we will use. So you get an access token for a certain resource on the graph. I will show you this like test-wise. Or you get a general access token. Whatever you do, it just retrieves you the access token. So with that, maybe let's just try this out, okay? So if I do here a test code and say, hey, token equals get access token, I can write the token out here. Let's save this. Let's bring up PowerShell and let's run PS1. And let's see what happens. So here's what I get. And let me see. I'm not sure if I can mask this sanely or not. So let's go to JWTMS. It's a little nicer to see it decoded. Here it is. And here are the claims, and this is a token, right, that I get. And this token says it is there for the REST API in order to talk there. So this is basically what your AZ tooling gives you in order to generate access tokens. You can do that, and I'm leveraging this. This is all it is, okay? As I said, you can look it up later, and then that's basically it. Okay, good. So what we actually want to do, and let me bring in this, we want to invoke the REST API. And in order to understand, so we want to do something. In other words, we want the REST API to generate a service connection now. This is what we want to do. So here, this is generate the service connection. Okay, cool. So obviously, we don't know how to do that. So what's the next thing to do? So I go here and I'm going to Azure DevOps Graph API. So here it is. This is the official documentation and I am on the current version 7.1. Cool. This is the old version, by the way, but it's okay. If nothing breaks, why change it? So anyway, here's the graph on the left side. And what we actually want to do, we want to go to the service endpoints. So let me show you. So service connections actually are called service, let me, endpoint, and nothing. Okay, cool. How can I search here? And what is subject query users, provider? No. Is it? Oh, it's under the projects, I think. So let me see. I might search for the deep link. I think it is. Here it is. Service endpoint. Here's service endpoints. So service endpoint is the official name in the Graph API for service connection. Another critique that I want to mention against Microsoft. Why is this not named consistently, guys? Consistency is the one thing that Microsoft currently lags a lot, okay, without any reason. So here's the service endpoint and here's the create method. So that's basically what we need to do. So we need to create a post request against, remember, dev azure.com, giving our organization name. Okay, so we have a variable. Let's start with that. It's easy. So let's generate an org name variable and let's call it codingfreaks. Because why? How do I know? Because my Azure DevOps organization, dev azure.com, and then codingfreaks. This is the organization I'm targeting, and this is the organization name. Okay. So here you go, codingfreaks. That's my org name. Okay, fine. Let's go back to the documentation. So then I need to create this. So this is like whatever, and then service endpoints. This is, and then API version is the thing. So that is the URL. So now if you look into my invoke, my helper method, this takes in the organization name. Project name could be empty because this is something I'm not doing on the project, I think. Yeah, I'm doing it on organization. And then giving it the method, we will be post, and then I will give it the API type for Azure DevOps, because this one is pointing to dev azure.com. Great. And then the relative URL here. This guy is only this part of the URL, which is pointing me somewhere. All the other stuff of the URL is built by my logic. As you can see, here is API version something, underscore APIs, and here comes the relative URL. Okay, that's what I do. Okay, cool. Meaning, what I can do is I can say, well, listen, the organization name is my org name. Okay, that is what it needs to be. I can paste it in here. So I will say the relative URL, hey, the relative, oh, I need to do this. The relative URL will be, what was it? This one. Here it is. So let's do that. So then I'm a little bit astonished that he's not doing the project. In fact, I want to do a service connection inside of a project. So I will provide my project name. Let me do that real quick. Project name will be, what is it? Demo? Demo. This one. Demo. Actually, maybe I need more of this. Project name equals demo. Let's do this as a variable and let's pass it in here. So here we go. So we also know the method needs to be post. Here we go. And then we need to tell him the content type will be application JSON. That's what we talk about. Let's do the multi-line thingy. And in the end, because this is a post request, we need to give it a body with some JSON that we still do not have. Okay, let's look it up in the documentation. This thing is telling you what you need to provide in the body. And the good thing is they have an example here in order what data you need to provide. So there's a lot of stuff you need to provide. So as you can see, the interesting stuff comes down here, which is service principal, which we are not going to use. This is the service principal based, and we do not want to use this. So we will do differently. So what we will do is we will build the body step by step. So let's go. The body will be a PowerShell object. First thing is we need to provide a name for the service connection. So that was the thing that I just said, okay, whatever, sample SC. This is just the name which will appear. Let me show you where it will appear. It will appear in this list. This is the name it shows, right? So it needs to be unique in that project. Okay, cool. So this is the name. The next thing is the type. So what is the type? I will write it down for you guys. So Azure RM. So what this is simply when you click here, every entry here has a key. And if you click here, it means Azure RM in one word. This is what is behind this setting. Okay, cool. Let's go ahead, and now comes the URL. And this URL happens to be https management.azure.com. I'm not sure I did it. Do we find it in the documentation? The URL, here it is. It's a fixed value. It could be, or it must be a slash in the end. Very careful here. So let's put a slash. So I just did this one, right? So you can name it this how you want. Type is Azure M. That's basically the three things that we did. Okay, so let's talk about this data thingy. Okay, so the data thingy is another object, which is a sub-object here, and it needs the creation mode. It's the first thing that you need to tell him is manual. This is the thing which is in parentheses normally in the portal. We want to create it by ourselves. The environment name is Azure Cloud. So what does this even mean? So we saw that, by the way, also in the portal. Let's go here, new, Azure RM next. So what we did is we said, no, manual, that's what we selected. And then we go to workload identity, and then here's the environment, Azure Cloud. See, that's the same settings here. So let's go here, and you see that's exactly the same. It's a manual one for Azure Cloud. Okay, the next one is scope level. What we actually want to do is subscription. So this thing should be in Azure over there, should be resolving in a subscription level service principle. And you know, we are just claiming this is for subscription. Is there any equivalent in this UI? No, it's not. It's always subscription, I think, here. You don't have the option to do it differently. Okay, cool. Let's go on. The next thing, what you need to provide is, if you say scope level is subscription, you need to provide subscription name and subscription ID. In order to, in order to make my life easier, I'm thinking about using, because I later would need to mask it. Anyways, I will just paste it in, and then later I will mask it out of the video. Hopefully. Okay, here it is. This is my subscription name, and this is my subscription ID. I'm always unsecure if I need to mask it, but I will do it. So subscription name will be this, and subscription ID will be this. So I always do something like that. Here on the top, I have some variables, which are not the defaults. So I'm doing this here, probably the name. Let's do it service connection name. And let's do it also here. It makes it easier to later. And I probably shouldn't mix single and double quotes all the time, but turns out if you build up things, double quotes are better. Let's see. I'm using double quotes on the top and single quotes down there. Very consistent. There you go. And because I'm talking this stupidity, let me replace right away. And from now on, we are consistent. Better. Okay. By the way, did I now mess it up here? Probably. Probably, because here is exactly where I cannot do that. Oh no. Let me go and undo that, and let's do it manually. Bear with me. Let me do it the right way so that I can... Okay, let's go. So that's it, and now I have it here. So then there is this thing called, in the documentation, you can also see it here. This is the service endpoint reference. It's the next thing we need. Okay, let's go. This is an object again. I think it's an array, right? Ah, yeah, it's an array. So that's how you say, hey, now comes an array, but it's an array of objects in PowerShell. So it needs a name. And this name is the same as this one. So it's the service connection name. Let's see, is that true? The name here is exactly the same as here. You can see this is, don't ask me why. I didn't do that. So it's the same name. Okay. But now what we want to do is we need to say, hey, listen, there's a project reference to, and this is again an object. And this says ID equals, and we don't have it. And name, we have that. It's the project name. So demo in my case. Okay, project name. So what we need is this project ID. How do we get it? So turns out we need get the project ID. That's the step we need in order to proceed. So let's name it project ID, but we don't have it yet. How do we do that? Turns out this is another different call to the Azure DevOps API. So what it is this time is we again need to, let me bring this in. We again need to call that. And we need to give it the organization name. Come on. This time we don't give it a project name, but instead we give it only a relative URL called projects, and we give it a method of get. If you don't familiar with this backtick thingy, it means in PowerShell you can have multiple lines. So this command is multiple lines, and in order to tell them that, not to have it in one big line, this is backtick. So that's what we do. And now let's say project response equals this. Normally we would say, so we want the response. And actually, let's do a return here and see what comes out of it, okay? Return, so we exit the script here. We just want to step-by-step test the script out. So let's see what happens if we say, can you please write the project response? I think that I need the value, but we will see. So run PS1. So this guy gives us this. You see, it's an object, some count, some value. So actually, we are only interested in the value of that response in this thing. It's a JSON. Let's do the run. So now it looks a little bit better because we are only interested in the value. And then we can see that, for instance, if we say, hey, can you give me the ID? What comes out of it? So and actually this ID is our project ID. Okay, so that's what we did, but we just get any project ID. So the problem with that is we need to, let's say this is a little bit different. Let's show you why this is bad. Let's go to this organization. Let's create a new project, demo 2. Description private, I will delete this later. This is just Scrum and create. So I'm creating a second project here, demo and demo 2. Okay, now I have 2 projects in this organization. So what happens if I'm going to run PS1? So now I get this, and now strange stuff happened. I forgot to return. Did he do that? No. I got an exception. So actually, let me write out now from that thing our response from this request now, and then whatever. So now we get 2 entries, right? So now we have a problem. So actually what we need to do now is we need to do a little bit magic with PowerShell. So let me see. This is, if I convert this, I think from JSON, what comes out of that? It's actually not working because I need to convert it to JSON first, a thing that I never understand. And then this is something you do in PowerShell a lot. So let's do that. Okay, so here we go. Or is it, can I actually do where object? And then can I, is that already an object? I think it is. So let me do the following. I want to do a where, which is very strange. And can you give me this thing? and then if you find it, the first element of it. And then what happens now? So can you give me the first element? And then this would be the project equals, and then it will be project ID. So, but before we do this, let's write down which project he got. It should be demo, not demo 2. And sure enough, he finds demo by this where condition. So I'm taking the response of the web request, which is an array potentially of 1, 2, whatever. And then what I do is I'm doing like a where expression on it and filtering it by name on exactly the project name that I defined up here so that he does not have anything else there. And this will return or result in an array because this is what where does. And I'm only interested in the first hit. Problem with this is actually it could be that this throws an exception later, because if he does not find a single element here pointing to the first of something which is not an array or a null array, will throw an exception in PowerShell. I don't care. So this works, and this means our project ID must be 38cd, whatever, return, and let's do it again. And then I should have the project ID here. Let's ensure that we spit it out, and there it is. To be honest, I cannot tell you if you see somewhere here, if you go in Azure DevOps, I think you never see the project ID whatsoever. I'm not sure. It's always the name in the URL. It never shows the project ID itself, but this is what it is. Nice. So we now have the project ID, and this whole stuff was there in order to be able to put it here in this construct. So back here, now comes the important part. After this array, we need to talk about the authorization. Let me do this lowercase as I did all the time. And this is an option thing. Let me go to the docs again. So now we're talking about this stuff, okay? So what we want to do a different thing here. We don't want to have service principal. So that's why what we actually do is the scheme that we want to use is, I think, workload identity federation. And this is the magic string. This is where we tell him we don't want to create this old service principal thing. By the way, I think my camera got stuck, which is bad. Let me see if I can fix that. I think my camera is kind of wildly off. So maybe switch it off. I don't know what's going on, to be honest. Okay, so without camera then. Sorry for that. Okay, so now workload identity federation. So the point that I don't understand is, hey, Microsoft, why are you giving in the documentation, why are you giving the old default and not the new one? Nothing here tells me if I'm going from that road, and I'm never looking into the Azure DevOps portal. Nothing tells me here, at least, that I probably should not use service principal. And by the way, this is nice that they have an example here, but you get the response as well. And you have some documentation, which is mostly, it looks good, but mostly it is not very helpful. Anyways, okay, this is the scheme. For that scheme, we need also parameters, but these parameters are basically pretty simple. The one thing is you need a tenant ID and you need a service principal ID. Okay, so let's do this. Tenant ID and service principal ID. So, sadly enough, you have to learn this. This is not the client ID of the service principal. This is the object ID. So, but because this is so easily mistaken, let's rename this to service principal object ID. I will show you in a second what to do with that. So first of all, tenant ID needs to be fixed. So actually, let's do tenant ID equals to do. And you know what I'm going to do? I will put this in environment. I think, how's that? Env dash tenant ID. So what I will do is I will, in the backend, I will populate that because I think that's probably a good idea not to show you guys. So let me really do this. And tenant ID equals, and now I need to be a little bit clever, get this off the grid. Let me go to my Azure portal here, outside of the screen. Because the masking operation is really, really tedious. So let me get this out. Let me put this into this one. Clear the screen and just check if I have it right. Yeah. If I type correctly. Okay, here we go. So I can come back with my... So I will take it from the environment. Nice. So what I did back here, I had the tenant ID here. This is now in my environment variables. I'm getting it now out of the environments variables. And then what I have down here is the service principal object ID. And that is interesting because we don't know how to get it. Actually, we know. So the first thing I'm going to do now is I'm going to do the following. Let me prep my screen. I will now do what I told you should be done in the right way. So let me go here in Azure Portal. I will show you in a second. Let me go here. Let me go here and let me go here. So here are my deleted app registrations so that I'm not exposing anything. So what we're going to do now is we will do the job here of your tenant administrator, whoever that is, who prepped everything. And what we do is we go here and we say, this is codingfreaks demo. Account in this organization, no platform needed. We don't need it. It's just codingfreaks demo, register. And that's it. No password needed, nothing. We go here and we copy out this client ID. And what we need is the object ID. But we copy out the client ID. We do that. We could copy out this one right away. But it is very inconvenient for everybody to deal with those object IDs because they are not in the list. And in certain outputs, you always struggle to find the object ID. Here you find it easily. But what we will do is, hey, let's take this guy. Let's put it up there as a variable. This is probably service connection name. Oh, we said that this should be, by the way, DFSC, whatever. And then down there we say, listen, the service connection client ID service principal, I think, not connection, service principal. Client ID is this guy. So that's the client ID. Everybody knows this thing. So what you can do now, let me do this down here and let me show you. There's this PowerShell command, which is get AZ AD. And then it is, let me see, application. And what you can say is application ID is this thing. So give me this. You execute this. And if you are on the correct tenant, what this gives you, if you put it in parentheses and you go, give me the ID of that, you get this 06DDD, which happens to be exactly what we're searching. So we can leverage this. We just take it out and we say, listen, let's get the object ID of the SP, which is our variable that we desperately need, this guy, is now generated by executing exactly this command, get AZ, and it's AD application ID, better. Here we go. And then this is the service principal client ID, which we defined up there. So this is now the way we can reference an existing service principal. So that is what we did. This thing has no ID whatsoever. What we normally need to do now also is not us, but the admin, remember, After he created the service principal, he goes to role-based access control and defines on certain subscription, resource group, whatever, roles that this user, like a real user, should own. So that is what he needs to do. Okay, with that out of the way, let's continue. Okay, so now we have this. Very good. This is everything set up. The last thing that we need to define, let's do it up here, is, I don't know if we need to do it, but we do it. Is ready needs to go to the true value. So what this means is, and it's also in the documentation here somewhere, this is ready thingy. Was it here? Yeah, is ready and is shared as false. And owner is library, whatever library means. I don't even know. We need to look it up. I'm not going to do anything. So let's just say is ready is true. Okay. So now we have this object, this body. All we need to do is we need to convert it to JSON because we want to send out JSON over the wire. So what we do is the JSON is, hey, let's take the body variable, convert to JSON, but don't forget to set the depth, let's say, as to 10, because otherwise you get a warning that you have more than 2, maybe 5 is enough. It takes a lot of time and is so that's what it is. And now we do this. And what we do is we say this is the SC result. And actually, let's print out SC result to the console to see if it worked. So that's what we do. Let's try it out. /run ps1. So, we have an exception. Only fields that are defined in the service connection contribution type as input can be specified. Type name. I must call it type name. Okay, something we mistyped something. So let's see. Name type URL. Let me compare with my other name type URL. Data is there. Then creation mode, environment, scope level, fine. Subscription name, subscription ID, good. Service endpoint references. This is a long one. Let me maybe, dang it. Let me copy this exactly. Here we go. And then name, project reference, singular, is an object, ID and name. Perfect. Authorization. Maybe I mistyped this guy. This is always I didn't. Scheme, parameters, right? Tenant ID, service principal ID. And here we go. And this is the result. Maybe 10 was a good idea. So let's do it again. And it still doesn't work. Let me figure out what the problem. So following fields in the service connection are not expected. Environment name are not expected. What the heck? Environment name? Here, this one. And this is because I suck. It's just environment. Yeah. Okay, let's try it again. And lo and behold, we have a result. So we got a result from the API. So let's look up in our, where is it? Here? Yeah. Project settings, service connections, and there it is. So we just generated this guy with a lot of stuff, right? It's a lot of calls going on and a lot of magic, but that's not too bad. So we generated this guy, but we did not generate the other side in Azure, the service principal. But what we know is this and that need to be created on the service principal side, need to be part of it. Remember that. Okay. For now, let's delete this because this thing currently, this script currently is not idempotent. What I mean by that, I do not check beforehand if there is already one with this service connection name. So it would fail when I run it the second time. So what's interesting is this thing on authorization is very hard to lead. It's a parameters object, and I will show you in a second what comes out of it. So let me show you. I will copy it out. This is SC result. Let me show you how we can extract the stuff we need. So the issuer is SC result, that one. And the subject is this one. And let's check if that is true. And let's just create it in once again and see if we get those two things spit out on the console. So let's do this. And sure enough, there's stuff. There is the issuer and there's the subject. Okay, let's check if this is matching. I refresh it here. So the issuer is like just I could build it, okay? It would always be the same, but let's just let it generate it for us so that we can use it. And then the subject identifier has something with 1JTK, and sure enough, here it is, 1JTK. So that worked. We now know at this point in time, everything we need to know. So what this means is we are able now to finally generate the server's principal. Not to generate, create federation on existing service principal. That's what we need to do. Because our service principal already exists, that this guy. But what we need to see is that this federated credential gets populated, right? This is what we need. Okay, let's do that. So it turns out there's a command for that, which is called new AD app federated credential. There it is. So what do we need to do? We need to pass in the object ID of the application, which we already have. So this is this guy, the service principal object ID. See, here we need it again. Good that we already have stored it in a variable. The next thing is the audience. So the audience is a static string in our case, which is this one. API Azure AD token exchange. So the next thing is the name, and the name is the federated credential name. So what is the federated credential name? So we can define it. So for instance, what you could do is you could say, okay, let's call it DevOps. And I will show you this. Let's say org name dash project name. So let's do it this way. I will show you in a second, and we need double quotes here because we are building up a string. Nice. So then what you need is the issuer. Oh, glad we have that already. It's just the issuer. And last thing is the subject, which is just a parameter. And this is the subject here. And then this should be it. I'm just doing it. Let me ensure that I delete this again. And let's now do it all in one step. So let's execute the run PS1. And now I have insufficient privileges. Probably because my PIM ran out. So let me quickly, I have this on PowerShell, so I can show you this. Let's go to this folder. I'm not explaining why. kefgr. This is my tooling from my company. And what this is now doing, it will hopefully execute my privileged identity management request in order to bring me into a certain security group, which should allow me to execute this command. Let's see. So he did that. So that's all we do. We don't do PIM in the Azure portal. If you're interested in this scripting, just let me know, guys. I will happily show you this. And I'm thinking, by the way, about making this public. Anyways, let's see what happens. And I need to delete this again because he was able to create this. I always need to delete this guy. Always remember that. Do the run PS1, could be, and now everything is fine. So he says, I did everything. So first of all, here is my thingy. And now let's go to codingfreaks demo and refresh this page. And sure enough, we have a federated credential, which was named like we wanted. Is the name here? There. DevOps dash. So we know that this comes from Azure DevOps, right? Could be another federated credential to, let's say, what was it, like a pre-known thing like a container registry or something. So here's the audience. Remember, that is what we need to do. It's called Azure AD Token Exchange. And no description given. We didn't give a description, but this and that are matching. And this means this thing works now. It simply works. And I could add to this service principal, which was just here, I think. So to this service principal, I could, let me bring up the service principal page again, off screen. Owned application, no. It was named codingfreaks. Codingfreaks demo. So let me bring this guy up again. And, by the way, never mind. Here's the tenant ID. Oh, I have to mask all of this. This is so unnerving. Anyways, so I could have shown you the tenant ID probably also there and then mask it there, but whatever. So this means now that this thing worked. So I have everything here. It's one command. And for you guys, it means if you just simply, what you do, you create a service principal manually, or you let it be created. And then you just run the script, filling out all the stuff correctly. And then that's it. This information, you retrieve this information from your admin, Azure admin, because he created this service principal with this client ID. And then if you are not able to execute this command because you do not have the right to create service principals, which could easily be, what you need to do, you just need to send over this and tell the guy what actually you want to execute. So I need with audience this, and just the name, you don't care actually, but with issuer that and subject this, I need for this service principal that you created, I need a federated client credential. So that's it. That's basically it. So I cannot do my outro by showing you my face because my camera hung and I don't want to re-record everything. But anyways, I hope that this, guys, is going to help you, because you do not need to do this click orgy here, whatever. You don't need to do that. Let me delete it now. You just execute the script and it works like a charm. No problem at all. And yeah, it should be very helpful. Thanks for watching. I will now go to the cutting table and see what I can do with all the masking and stuff. And then hopefully I can get it out this year, if you know what I mean. See you next time. Bye.